So thank you very much for joining me. This is one of our revision sessions. Now we've finished with the units in your CloudPort information. And today we're going to be doing some revision and some recap on writing forms, different forms of writing. So lessons 2 and 3 were on Unit 2 writing forms, which we'll be recapping and looking at again today. You've learnt about writing forms. This won't be teaching it to you as such. The CloudPort information and the lessons did that. But we will have some discussion about the forms today, some polls and talk over exam style questions. As always, but especially in these revision sessions, please do feel free to ask if you have any questions. So as a reminder, some different forms of writing. These are different forms of non-fiction writing. We've got articles, that could be for a newspaper or an online article, letter, a leaflet, autobiography, and a speech. And I've written a description here. As we've always said, this might appeal to two. It might apply to two. You might think it might be one, it might be the other, but we're going to go for the best one. So the use of addresses and date, where would you most likely see that? What writing form would you most likely see the uses of addresses and dates? Where might we see those? A letter, Tabitha. Yeah, the use of addresses, plural, and a date. Yeah, you would definitely put a date on a letter, wouldn't you? Anyone else got any different ideas, or are you going to go, Nick says letter too? Yeah, we're going to go letter. Yes, correct, letter. Yeah, addresses, because if you're writing a formal letter, you would have your address and then you would have the recipient's address, wouldn't you? So that's letter, that's addresses, plural. And the date, you would always put the date that you are sitting down to write this letter. Well done. Well done on that writing form. What about an introductory paragraph and subheadings? Where would we find that? So like we've said before, some of these might apply to lots of different examples. So an introductory paragraph, you would definitely get that in an essay, wouldn't you? But what about subheadings as well? What sort of writing form would we find both of those in? A leaflet, Nick, you think a leaflet, an introductory paragraph and subheadings? Yeah, you would see that in a leaflet. An article, Tabitha, yeah, definitely. An article is the one I was going for. Yeah, you would get an introductory paragraph to tell you what the article is going to be about, and you would get subheadings to break that article up. Interesting that you said leaflet, Nick, because leaflet is one of the ones that doesn't really have hard and fast rules. A leaflet looks very much like you want the leaflet to look. So yeah, very, very much this is one of those ones that could be for a few. Could also be an essay, couldn't it? Which of these is most likely to be in first person and written in past tense? So first person, we've talked about this before. Something is usually written in first person or third person. Which one is likely to be first person and past tense? Speech, Nick. Would you be talking in a speech, an autobiography, Tabitha? Would you be talking in a speech about what had happened? You know, this happened, that happened, he did that, she did that. Would that be, it could be, you could have a speech in that, but it's most likely going to be either present tense or future tense in a speech, isn't it? But you could well have a speech that's entirely in past tense, you're right. This is another one of those ones that comes up in multiple ones, isn't it? But yes, I've gone for autobiography as well, Tabitha. It's always in first person. Auto means yourself, so you're writing an autobiography about yourself, it has to be in first person. And past tense because it's things that you've done. You can't write an autobiography about something you're doing right now or something you're doing in the future. So if you are asked to write an autobiography or you're asked to write a story as in an autobiographical way, you need to remember that that needs to be in first person and it needs to be in past tense. Lastly, no, I don't think it is lastly, actually, second to last, personal pronouns and emotive language to connect with the audience. This one's pretty tricky. So personal pronouns, you, we, us, me, and emotive language to connect. Really, really, you've got to connect with this one. Speech, yeah, everyone said speech, definitely. Yeah, definitely speech, that one. The use of, we spoke before, didn't we? The use of we and you and us and me makes the speaker feel more human, makes them relate to you. Emotive language to connect, because when you've not got written work, when you're hearing it and it's going past very quickly, if you don't connect with that audience, you've lost them. because they're bored and they're not listening. So it's quite different to writing, but you may well get this question in an exam and which tells you to write a speech, in which case you would have to write it as if you were speaking it. And these are things to remember. Lastly, organisational devices such as boxes, bullet points and headings. Leaflet, Tabitha, straight in there. I'd say this is another one that crosses genres maybe, but yeah, a leaflet, because if you think about a leaflet, you're looking at the organisation on the page, aren't you? Bullet points, boxes, headings, titles, subheadings, but the organisation on the page is what's really going to catch your eye, isn't it? Well done. So thinking of those writing forms now and other forms of writing you've learned about, you need to be aware that each of them has a certain layout and rules that you need to follow when creating your pieces. Some of these rules will be a lot more strict than others, and some rules are very fluid. What your layout looks like depends on your writing form, your audience, and also to a certain extent your own personal preference. Let's take a look at some examples now of layouts and tell me what writing form you think would fit with each layout. What about this one? Let's pretend that these blocks are pieces of writing, pictures, they could be anything. What do you think that layout signifies? What layout would you apply to which writing form? Article, definitely. Yeah, this looks very much like an online article or a newspaper article. It's got that look, hasn't it? So what would the bar across the top be then, if we're looking at this as an article? What would the thin rectangle? The title, yeah, the title, headline, either of those two words is fine. Definitely would be. And what about the little box to the right? What do we imagine that might be in an article? A photo. Well done. Yeah, picture. Well done. If you do get a question in an exam about writing an article, feel free to write it in this layout if that's how you wish, because that is what you would be doing naturally, isn't it? I'm not saying you have to do boxes, don't do anything like that, but to write the headline as if you would, maybe to draw a picture, absolutely fine if you want to go about it in this specific layout. What about this layout? What are we thinking of this one? A letter? Any other guesses? Definitely a letter, isn't it? It's very obvious, this one. Yeah, well done. So what are the boxes, the two top boxes, one on the right and one on the left? What would those be? Addresses. Well done. Yeah, we spoke before about multiple addresses, didn't we? And the thin rectangle, what's the thin rectangle? Well done. Yeah, who it's to? Yeah, the addressee, dear sir or madam. Yeah, who you're writing to. Absolutely that. And then the big rectangle is the bulk of the letter, isn't it? If you do get the question to write a formal letter in the exam, you absolutely would need to do this layout. They need to know that you understand the writing form, that you understand what it has to happen in that letter. So when we say formal letter, what do we mean by a formal letter? What's the difference between a formal and an informal letter? Do you remember? And how do you know by looking at it that this is a formal letter? That was a big question. There's lots of bits to that question. Sorry.
Is a formal letter like when you're writing to someone, like when you're going for a job interview or applying for a job?
Yes, definitely.
And then informal is like to your friends or family?
Absolutely, definitely. Yeah, friends or family would be an informal letter.
Yeah.
Nobody would write a letter like this to their mum, would they? But yes,
No.
if you're writing a job application, absolutely a formal letter, definitely. Yeah, well done for that one. Tabitha has said 2 addresses. Yeah, you can look at this letter and the fact that it's got those 2 addresses and straight away know that's a formal letter. You would not be writing, like Nick said, to your friend or your family with the 2 addresses like this. You may well put your own address at the top, some people do, for an informal letter, but you wouldn't put their address as well, would you? It's just unnecessary. So well done. Yeah, that's how you spot it. And be aware of that if you are asked to write your own letter as well. An informal letter would have no rules. It looks however you want it to look. What about this one? This one's tricky. What layout do we think this might be? And what might all those boxes and circles be? This one is tricky. I had fun making this one. A leaflet, Tabitha, a poster, Nick, absolutely. Yeah, a leaflet or a poster, an advert, something like that, something eye-catching, something creative. What could the circles be? What do you think those circles might be? Text, yeah, absolutely could be, couldn't it? It could be one word like fun, super, or pictures, Tabitha, absolutely pictures. Yeah, it could be pictures of zoo animals or a soft play or something. Yeah, definitely, it could be either. What about the boxes? What are those likely to be? What sort of information would you have in on a poster or in a leaflet, pamphlet? We talked about leaflets before, didn't we? We had ones for places to visit, we had takeaway leaflets, we had voting leaflets. What might you imagine might be in those boxes? We talked about audience and purpose last week, didn't we? What sort of stuff do we want to get across to the people looking at our leaflet or our poster? Well done. Information about the place, absolutely. Whatever this is talking about, whatever it's advertising, whatever it's showing you, it would be information, wouldn't it? So if this is a poster, it would have opening hours or the price of something. Absolutely, definitely. And again, if you're asked to do a poster or a leaflet or a article or a pamphlet, sorry, you could lay it out like this. You could lay it out however you want. There are no hard and fast rules. We're back now again to audience and purpose. I told you this was behind every piece of writing that you create, and it really is. So when you get an exam question and you're about to write a form of writing, you need to consider your audience and purpose before you can work out which form you're going to use. For example, if a question asks you to write a letter to a friend or write a letter to a head teacher, they will both look very different and they'll have completely different structures, language, and tone. So we're going to take a look now at some pretend exam questions and talk about what you would need to remember about those different forms of writing that it's asking you to create. And bear in mind the audience and purpose for these. So the audience that it's given you, but also your audience of the examiner. If they've asked you to write an article, they want to know that you understand what an article looks like and sounds like and has to have inside it. So let's have a look at this pretend question. Your school council is thinking of adding more fair trade products to the school canteen. Write a letter in favour or against this to your headmaster. So what's the purpose of this piece of writing that you're going to be doing? Can you think of what the purpose might be for this? Of course, the purpose is going to be that you get an amazing grade on your GCSE, but the purpose that this is making you think of. Would your letter to the head teacher be to persuade or to argue or to entertain? Yes, definitely to persuade. Yeah, it's a letter to persuade, isn't it? And so we're going to use all the language that we know we need to use when we're persuading somebody. We're going to use persuasive language. We're going to call upon that part of us that goes, right, informed persuasive language. I know what I need to include in this letter so that they know you've understood that this is a persuasive letter. The structure. How does this letter look? What kind of letter is this? It's to your headmaster. What kind of letter is this? What's it going to look like? A formal one, definitely formal, absolutely. Yeah, so it's going to look like the one that we said before, the one that Nick said looks like it's written for a job interview. Yeah, that's how you would write to your headmaster. Language. What kind of language do we talk to our headmaster in? Polite. Yeah, definitely polite language. You would be polite, even though it is writing to persuade, you would be persuading him politely and tactfully, wouldn't he? Yeah, definitely polite. And you could say formal again, couldn't you? Formal language. You would use big words. You wouldn't say things like can't. You would say things like cannot. You wouldn't say haven't. You would say have not. You wouldn't use the contractions. You would try and make yourself sound as articulate and as formal as possible. And what about the tone in this letter? What is this? Although this is written to persuade, what kind of tone are we going to go for? Will it be pushy? Will it be really persuasive? What will we go for to a head teacher? Or you might want to go a bit wishy-washy, like, this is your decision, I don't really mind. What kind of tone are we going to go for? I think we could probably use these words that you've already used, couldn't we? The formal and polite. We could definitely stick with a formal tone and a polite tone. But if we're writing to persuade, maybe we need to do a bit more than polite. Maybe we need to be not forceful, but we need to have a serious tone, don't we? We need to sound serious. We need to sound like we've researched this. We need to sound like we're, yes, definitely persuasive, definitely a persuasive tone. And persuasion comes from authority, doesn't it? So if you sound like, if you've done your research on fair trade, and if you're putting forward reasons to the head teacher why this would be good for our school, you're going to come across as an informed tone, as a authoritative tone, aren't you? So that's the tone that this would be in a letter to the head teacher. It's not going to be a chatty tone or a funny tone. There's not going to be pushy either. It's just going to come across as informed and educated. Another scenario, another question for us. Your friend is in hospital after breaking their leg. Write a letter telling them about what you have been doing recently to cheer them up. Another letter. What's the purpose of this letter? Funny. Yeah, well done, Tabitha. This letter is written to entertain, isn't it? That's what you're doing here. Informal, absolutely. Yes, this is an informal letter to your friend written to entertain them. You're trying to cheer your friend up, definitely. Structure, what does this letter look like? Yes, a very informal letter. It looks however you want the letter to look. If you want to make your friend laugh by doing a very formal letter, you could do that. If you just want to scribble their nickname that you call them and then sign off with your own nickname, you can do that. It looks however you want it to look. You can draw pictures in your letter to your friend. It doesn't necessarily have structure. An informal letter has very little rules. What about the language? This is your friend who you're trying to cheer up. What language are you going to use in this letter? Even in an exam, even if in an exam asked you to write this, what language are you going to be using? Silly, Tabitha. Yeah, you're making your friend laugh. You're going to be doing jokes. You're going to be doing your own in-jokes, aren't you? All the things that you and your friend know. You're going to be including those. What do we call that kind of language? When it's informal, it's silly, it's to your friends. Do you know what we call that kind of language? We've covered formal language with the head teacher letter. That was formal language. Yeah, Nick, well done. Whatever you really want, whatever language you want to use. You know, if you were writing a letter to your friend, really, you'd probably be swearing or using some kind of slang in there, wouldn't you? I wouldn't say swearing in an exam, but absolutely slang. Whatever slang you use with your friend, I would absolutely use that to say to the examiner, hey, look, I understand that this is a letter to my friend, and this is what I would be saying naturally to my friend. So we've got formal language. We've got colloquial language, which is everyday, and then we've got slang. And if you were writing to a friend, you very well likely would be using slang, wouldn't you? And colloquial, but no swears. Tone, what about the tone of this language? Again, we've already covered this with some words. We've covered this with adjectives. What tone would be in this letter? A light tone, yeah, very light. You know, even if you've had a really hard week, you're not going to tell him about that hard week, are you? Because he's had a worse week. You're going to keep it light. You're going to keep it jolly. You're going to keep it friendly. Good. Yeah, a very light tone. Like you said before, a silly tone, a funny tone. Well done. Right, another scenario for us. A teen magazine is looking for people to submit lively reviews. Write a review for a TV show or a book that you read recently. So what's the purpose here? We're writing an article for a teen magazine. What's the purpose of it? There's a couple of purposes for this one. To inform, yes, very much. We are informing somebody about this thing that we've watched or the thing that we have read. We are informing them. Well done. Another purpose, there is another one. Persuade. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I didn't think of that one. Definitely, yeah. You want to say to somebody, hey, watch this, it's amazing. You know, read this book, it's going to change your life. Yeah, definitely to persuade. I didn't think of that one. Okay, there's another one then. So if I was writing to just inform, that was the only thing I was doing was informing, it would look very much like instructions, wouldn't it? Like an instruction manual. But this is an article and they want you to read the article. They want you to buy their magazine. What else is the purpose? What else do we have to do? Can you think of a word in there that tells you what the purpose is going to be of this review. There is a real giveaway in this. I don't think I can highlight on this, but have a look at the word lively. That's it, Nick. Well done. Lively. Well done. To submit lively reviews. They want it to be lively. They want it to be happy. They want their tone to carry all the way across the magazine, even in their reviews. So your review will inform them about whatever it is you're watching or reading. It will persuade them to join you and watch that program or read that book, and it will be entertaining. Your purpose is to entertain people in a magazine. Structure. What will this look like? What will your review look like? Picture there are some magazines as an example, and I'm sure you know from magazines there is 100 different ways for them to look. What are you going to make your structure look like? What will your structure be in this writing form? Appealing, Nick. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you want it to be eye-catching. You want it to be appealing. The front cover. Yeah, so like that on there with the pictures and the boxes and the emotion coming through. Yeah, the joyous, happy, lively. Yeah, definitely. You want it to be lively and appealing. You want it to look like a front cover with pictures and headlines. Definitely. You've got information to get across as well, though. So how are we going to give that information across? How would we structure that? Which one of the ones we looked at before would it look like? Would it look like the letter or the article, or would it look like the leaflet? Yeah, it would look very much like the article, wouldn't it, with the headline and the pictures, but maybe a bit of the leaflet mixed in. You know, there's no reason you can't have pictures going that way. There's no reason you can't have boxes of information in the review. It wants to be lively. It wants to feel lively. You don't want someone in a teen magazine to think that they're reading a book, a boring book. You want it to feel different and snappy. So it could look like however you wanted it to look like, as long as you stick with the lively theme. Language. You are writing a review in a teen magazine to teenagers. What language, sorry, will you use? Even if you're an adult and you're retaking this GCSE and you have not been around teenagers for 20 years, in the exam, when you are writing this article to teenagers, what kind of language will you use? Persuasive, Tabitha. Yeah, it's a review. Yeah, it's a review. You're going to tell them that you want them to read this. Absolutely. Yeah, it will be a persuasive language, persuasive tone. What kind of words will you use? What kind of language, individual words will you pick? Remember, it was asking for a lively review to teenagers. What kind of words would you be using? What language? Any other ideas? I think in this one, they would very much be wanting to know that you understood how teenagers wanted to read. So you wouldn't be using formal language. You wouldn't be using big, long words. You would definitely be using colloquial language. You would be using chatty, everyday language. Perhaps you would be using slang, but I would maybe stay away from slang too much because you don't want to sound like you're trying to be too cool with the kids. But colloquial language, definitely chatty. The language that we're using now, nothing too formal. You would definitely use contractions like can't and won't. You would make it sound like an everyday conversation with maybe bits of slang thrown in there if it was appropriate. Tone. What's the tone of this piece? Again, we've used these words and it tells you in there the tone of the piece. What sort of tone are we going to go with? What vibe? Yeah, a lively one, a lively tone. It's going to be upbeat all the way through. Even if there's bad bits in this film or this book that you've been watching, you're going to talk about the bad bits in a lively way, aren't you? If there's negatives, you're going to talk about the negatives in a lively way. You're going to keep it upbeat, maybe short, snappy sentences. Absolutely a lively tone. Well done. And a friendly tone probably as well, wouldn't it? You know, this is a magazine that you're going to want your audience to pick up all the time. So yeah, a friendly tone as well. Homework has no value. Students should be left to enjoy their free time. Write an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your point of view relating to this statement. So a broadsheet newspaper, a very serious newspaper, and you're going to write an article explaining your point of view. You might agree with this statement, you might disagree, you might be on the fence, you might consider both sides. What's the purpose of this writing? Yeah, you're writing to persuade, aren't you? You're trying to persuade someone to agree with you. You're writing to argue. You're writing to argue your side, and you're going to persuade other people to agree with you. If you think that homework is really beneficial and that children need to learn to self-study and all those other things, you're going to hammer those points home and you're going to get someone to agree with you. Definitely, yeah. Purpose to argue and persuade. And the structure. What will this article for a broadsheet newspaper look like? We've covered an article before. This is another article. Will it look the same or will it look quite different? Yeah, definitely. An informative structure. So again, you're giving across lots of information here. Unlike the last article where you're talking to children or teenagers and it can look lively and it can be all over the place, this one for a broadsheet newspaper needs to be serious. It needs to give you all that information in a serious manner. So it would have big blocks of writing, wouldn't it? Big chunks of writing. Would it have many pictures in this? Would you have pictures and subheadings and bits to break it up? No, you wouldn't. No, it would definitely be a serious piece. Maybe one picture at the top, definitely a headline at the top, but no, nothing to break it up. It would be much more serious. Language. What language are we using here for a broadsheet newspaper? Yeah, persuasive language, because you want them to agree with you. Again, you are giving your point of view and you're hopefully going to get them to agree with you. But what kind of words are we going to use for this? What language are we going to use? Is it a colloquial language, formal language, chatty, slang, formal language? Absolutely, very, very much. If you are asked to write an article for a teen magazine, you're using chatty language. If you're writing an article for a broadsheet newspaper, extremely formal language, no contractions. It would be cannot, would not. You need to express to the examiner that you understand the language that it's asking from you. And the tone, lastly, the tone of this piece. What kind of tone are we talking? Homework has no value. Students should be left to enjoy their free time. A strong tone. Good description there. I like that adjective, a strong tone. Yeah, you're going to come across as very formal, very persuasive with a strong tone. Yeah, again, a serious tone. No chattiness, no jokes, no liveliness here. It's going to be information given to you in a strong manner. I like that word strong. I really like that one. That's good. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me for another lesson for the revision session. I will see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.